Hey folks, Dave Temple here. As you may have heard, there have been a number of sponsors on this show over the past year, and I'm so grateful for every one of them who believed enough in the show to keep the lights on. That said, I am making available new sponsorships for the remainder of October and the entire month of November. And whether you're an author, an editor, a publishing company, or you're just someone who enjoys this show and you'd like to help support us, and you just happen to have a product or service you'd like the Thriller audience to know about, this would be a great time to advertise on this show. Look, truth be told, this is a one-man show. It was when we started 3.5 years ago and remains that way today. Yes, there are expenses for running the show on a monthly basis. There are hosting costs and audio, video, editing software costs, some ad marketing costs, and well, they add up. So as tough as it can be asking for your help, I think we're good enough friends that I can do just that, right? And while I'm not a fan of holding out a 10-cup asking for help, I do feel confident, very confident in saying if you like the show and would like to help support it, perhaps you just happen to have a book or 3 you'd like to advertise. And if you need some testimonials, I've got a few people who have told me they've had great success advertising on the Thriller Zone. In fact, I'd point you to the Story Factory, Steve Stratton, Matt Scott, or our newest sponsor, DJ Williams. Yeah, in fact, he told me just the other day he's seeing serious spikes in book sales since advertising with me. So give it some thought and reach out to me at thethrillerzone@gmail.com, and we can make something powerful happen for you. Okay, now let's get back to the show. Hello and welcome to The Thriller Zone. I'm your host, David Temple, and on today's 202nd episode, I welcome Andrew Child, author of In Too Deep, with his brother, Lee Child. Now, as you'll see at the beginning of the show, we run into a little bit of technical difficulties. The good news is the audio stays with us. The bad news is the video leaves us, but that's okay. We are a audio medium first and foremost, which is what podcasting started as. The video angle of this is a bonus. And please excuse the surroundings. I'm in the middle of a move, so it's a little bit disarray, but we have a new studio in the making. Anyway, enough about that. I am so excited to welcome Andrew Child to the show. He is such a genuine, kind guy with just a great story to tell. So without any further ado, let's step on into the Thriller Zone studios with Andrew Child.
So how's things, David? It's been evidently it's been a bit of a tough year. I'm sorry to hear that.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's funny, Andrew, because I went back and I pulled up the old episode from almost exactly 2 years ago.
Andrew Child is our special guest for the 100th episode.
Well, thank you, David. It is an absolute pleasure to be here. It would be a pleasure to be here on any.
And I'm looking at me and I'm like, oh, Jesus, that face has been stepped on a couple of times. I think it's, it's amazing what cancer will do to your body, and then subsequent surgeries and radiation and hormone replacement therapy. Yeah.
Yeah, not good. No fun involved with that at all. No.
Not so much. But that's we're good. We got the all clear. Yeah.
That's what you want to hear, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. So far, so good. You know, one thing I love about talking to you, Andrew, is that you're free and easy, and you're fun to be around, and there's no problems and no hassles. And I apologize for the last tech issue. That was just.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
No problem at all. You know, as long as we get to talk, that's all that counts. It doesn't matter when or, everything is fine.
Good. Last time we spoke, it was 2 years exactly, as we said. I was starting off the day. The reason you got into the green room before I did, I was out back pouring an extra coffee. I love my espresso. And folks, one of these nice things about Andrew's group that they do for me, they give me, of course, notes about the book, and then there's a little cheat sheet on the back, which I generally don't read cheat sheets. I like to do all my own homework. But come to find out, your brother Lee, Lee Child, how you doing, drinks like 30 cups of coffee a day. This says you drink 35. Now, A, is that true? And B, do you have a built-in competition?
Well, it is true, yeah. I mean, to qualify that, I don't do that every single day of the year.
Okay.
That would probably be a bit much. But when I'm writing, I'm drinking coffee all the time. And then as we're getting close to deadline, and all you're doing is writing, then the consumption always ratchets up. And by the time I'm finishing the book, it's comfortably 35 cups in a day. So then what I do when the book is finished, I kind of back off, try to pull back so that when I write the next book, it's not going up to, 40 or 50, because people say that would be a bad thing. So 35, easy. We don't really compete with each other on it. It's just that, we both love strong black coffee, so it somehow it fits the rhythm of writing. You have an idea, you get that down on the page, and particularly the way that we write the Reacher books. No outlining, just thinking, okay, what happens next? It really works well that you work your way through an idea, then you're thinking, what happens next? And you don't know. So you go to the coffee machine, you get it, filled up and fill the water and brewing away. And then, because your brain, the front of the brain is occupied and the back of your brain can be figuring out these important questions. So the routine of it works really well. And I probably have time to squeeze in a few extra ones because, Lee famously smokes like a chimney, but I don't. So, I need to fill those times when he's reaching for the next cigarette. So coffee does it for me.
Yeah, and there's only one thing better than that is coffee and cigarettes. However, I gave that up a long time ago. I think it's interesting when writers have little things that they hold on to. Some people, there's diehard tea fans, diehard coffee fans, diehard, I've got to have music playing in the background. Then there are people who go, oh no, total silence, like a library. Where do you fall on that? That's pure curiosity.
Yeah, I'm definitely on the. I love music. I listen to music nearly all the time, but I can't listen to it while I'm writing because I have this bizarre thing where if I hear a word spoken, I just naturally write it down. I can't help it. And so if I'm listening to music, I'll be trying to write a fight scene or something, and then, I'll have, something about, someone falling in love or whatever in the middle. So I don't think it would work well. It's the same. If you do an event and somebody asks you to sign their book, I have to kind of chat to them for a moment and then disengage while I write whatever they want me to write, because if I'm listening to them, I will write whatever I'm hearing, I will write, and it will just be some completely random, unconnected, bizarre, potentially rude thing. So if I continued talking while I would probably ruin more books than I signed. So I have to not have anything verbal going on when I'm trying to write, or else it all gets mixed together.
That is hilarious. Now, I share a similar thing only in that, and this is so funny, and I was talking to someone recently about the difference between men and women, the way that women can absorb and process many things simultaneously, and guys are not wired quite that way because for instance, if I'm writing or I'm editing something and my wife comes in and starts talking to me, I will give her the, oh yeah, but I can't literally concentrate on what I'm doing endless. Yeah. Do you need an answer right this second? Or I have to edit, but I can't do, whereas she can do 6 things at once.
Yeah, I'm the same. Not only, can I only do one thing at once, I can only do it very slowly. So, I need to be somewhere. I guess it's part of the silence thing. I need to be somewhere where I'm not being distracted by anything, where there's nothing, competing for my attention or concentration. And so, honestly, that's why Wyoming is such a great place to write, because when we lived in Chicago, there was constantly something happening. You'd hear a siren going by, you'd hear people in the next door apartment having an argument, you'd have, there'd be some building work going on somewhere. And then I'm very curious and inquisitive. I guess you could probably say nosy. Uh-huh. So if I hear something happening, immediately I have to find out, well, what is happening? Who is doing it? Why are they doing it? What else might they have been doing? So anything like that, it just distracts me. So I need to be saved from myself. I have to be put somewhere where I can just happily focus on the job. And in fact, I think that's why I like writing at night so much. Night is my most productive time for writing. And I think part of that is that when we're sitting here now, we've got all of this. You can see the rest of the room. I can look out of the window. I can see what you're doing, and all of that is distracting me. As night falls, I love that feeling that it's as if the entire world shrinks down. Mm-hmm. All that is left is just me and the little pool of light from the laptop screen. Nothing else exists.
Yeah.
And therefore, there's nothing to distract me, and I can put all of my attention on the job in hand. So I think that's one reason why night is my favorite time for writing, because I just love that feeling that it's almost like time stands still. That you can't see anything happening, you can't see the sun setting, you can't see people going by. It's just literally this little pool of light, and that's your whole world. And then you populate that world with whatever story you're telling at the time.
I love that, and I'm with you. I think that's why mornings, like early mornings, are good for me. I'm a 4:30, 5 o'clock guy, because from radio days, I would get up at 3:30 for a 5 o'clock show. So I'm used to that rhythm, and my brain kicks in the minute I wake up. But I'm with you. I borrow the similarity in that the world is quiet. There's no barking dog. There's no television. It's just quiet. And you haven't had a chance to, what I call, start that monkey mind, where you're like, do I need to do this? And did I answer this email? And all that BS. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Whatever.
I'm the same. I like to, sort of mentally, I like to have the decks cleared. Even if it's just, I haven't put the dishes away, or I haven't, turned on the washing machine or something. Anything like that that's hovering around in the back of my mind is a distraction. So by the time it gets to the evening, all of that other stuff is done. The decks are clear. There's nothing to stop you.
Awesome. Well, today, of course, we're talking about In Too Deep. While we're talking about In Too Deep, there's so many things I want to talk about, and we're going to get to the explanation in a second. But I'm flashing back. I mentioned earlier that I was revisiting the 100th episode, and the book was No Plan B, and this is just me and my kooky brain. So if you think this is ridiculous, I'll cut it out. But I'm sitting there and I'm looking at the artwork, and I'm remembering our conversation. And I look at the cover of the book and I went, oh, how interesting is that? As writers, we notice everything, right? So I'm looking at it. All right, Jack Reacher, huge at the top, followed by Lee Child, pretty large, followed by a little bit smaller you, and then ends with No Plan B, almost like an afterthought. So then I pulled out this one, Lee's at the top, you're more prominent next, then it's just a Reacher novel, and then it's like, oh yeah, it's called In Too Deep, by the way, in case you want to know what the book is. Now, is that by design, or am I just, do I have too much time on my hands?
No, you've definitely hit on something there, and what it really comes down to is something that Lee had started right back at the very beginning. Right back when he wrote Killing Floor, because he had this concept that it should be all about the character, not about the author, not about the title of this year's book. It should be all about the character, Reacher. And he had an idea that what he wanted was for people to go to the bookstore or the library and say, have you got the new Reacher? Not worry too much about had they remembered the title this year, had they remembered the author's name. That doesn't matter. What matters was they wanted Reacher. And so that is something that he has been firm on right from the very beginning. And I guess that it probably was, maybe it was No Plan B, maybe it was the next one. There was a certain point where, you finish a project like publishing a book, and then ideally you sit down with everybody involved and look at what you liked and what could have been done better. And someone, I can't remember who it was now, might have been someone at the art department at Random House, just noticed that somewhere along the line, perhaps the balance had slipped. You mentioned it for No Plan B, where it was actually kind of a little difficult to tell which was the title, and so we went back to that original idea of trying to focus on Reacher, which is why you've got the Reacher novel part there, and then try to sort of calibrate the rest of the text around that. So definitely there was a conscious decision for the title of this new one, for the cover of this new one, In Too Deep, how they were going to present all of that on the cover. And
I love the colors. I'm always talking about how I love the covers. And then there's no mistaking who wrote it. Here on the back, the two handsome darling brothers. I do notice that you're standing in the front now.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was funny. We actually did that picture quite a while ago, back in, it was when COVID was still raging. So the publisher wanted a picture of us together for the jacket. They were going to send somebody up from Denver to take the picture, but then COVID struck. No one was allowed to do that kind of thing anymore. So actually, my wife, Tasha Alexander, took the picture, and we were it looks like we're basically standing next to each other, but we were actually, it was a trick of the perspective. We're actually quite a long way apart. Lee's quite a bit behind me. Yeah, it was fun doing that. I enjoyed it.
You guys are two tall drinks of water, aren't you?
Yeah, we're actually about this, almost exactly the same height. Yeah.
I had forgotten that soon after, maybe because you made such an impression on me, Andrew, you came back around and visited a second time shortly thereafter when you guys were doing a compilation with my good buddy Rick Bleiweiss. It was Hotel California. Now, I heard through the grapevine, and if this is old news, just smack me upside the head, but there is a new compilation with another rock theme, correct?
There certainly is, yeah. It came out just a little while ago, and it's absolutely fabulous. It's based on same concept, some of the same authors. Rick was heavily involved, and it's called Back in Black, inspired by
AC/DC.
the classic AC/DC album. And I was fortunate enough to be able to have a story in that compilation, and it was a really a fun story to write. It goes back to Reacher's early-ish army days. He's in Germany. His brother Joe is still around. He's working in military intelligence still. It's before he left for the Treasury Department. And Joe has got himself in a little bit of a bind with the situation that's occurring in Germany. So he calls his little brother Jack and says, can you take care of this? So Reacher steps into action, and I think it's fair to say, he does what needs to be done.
I kept asking myself this, Andrew, and I know this seems like a silly question. I'm like, what is it? Why do we love Reacher so much? I think about the TV show, the original movie, the series, the TV show, the books. And, it's always one guy, one place, always new. Oh, and matter of fact, in this particular book, I'm going to start with this. In Too Deep, Reacher wakes up alone in the dark, handcuffed to a bed in a makeshift hospital room. His possessions are gone. He has no memory of getting there. The last thing he recalls is being in a car he had hitched a ride with, getting run off the road, and the driver was killed. The thing about the books that I love so much is the simplicity. And simplicity doesn't mean simple-mindedness. It just means it A, and then it's B, and then it's C. It's just like Jack himself. It's, folding toothbrush, new town, new story. And I always ask myself, why is it that we love that so much?
Well, thank you. Yeah, and I agree. I mean, Reacher is, what we aim for is to have everything that you do need and nothing that you don't need. A bit like him traveling just with his toothbrush, And so, yeah, it's a question of just focusing in on what matters. And I think what makes a character like Reacher work and makes him so appealing, it works on two levels, really. On a sort of close-up level, it works because in our everyday lives, all of us, we face frustrations, we face situations that are annoying or aggravating that we desperately want to do something about, but we simply can't, because doing so would either get us fired, get us arrested, get us kicked out of our homes. All kinds of things would go wrong. You might not be physically capable of it. You might, all sorts of things might prevent you. So if you can have somebody do those things for you on the page, even though it's fictitious, not real life, there's a huge satisfaction there. But where you go through that arc of a problem emerges, somebody comes in, they engage with that problem, and they fix the problem. It's hugely rewarding, and it really goes back. It's some kind of primordial need within the human race, because this character, if you distill him all the way down, he's essentially a version of the knight Errant character, which has, the archetype that has been around since humans started telling stories. That classic formula of a stranger arrives in your town, he fixes your problem, and then this is the important part, then he leaves. And I think that the leaving often gets overlooked, but for me, it is the most important part. Because just imagine, David, somebody, you're having some big problem, somebody comes and fixes it for you, and then they move into the apartment next door. What are you going to do? Every day you're going to be thinking, God, do I have to make the guy coffee? If you live in a house, do I have to go mow his lawn? It would just be, instead of being this hugely freeing, cathartic experience, it would actually end up being an albatross, because you'd be lumbered with this obligation for the rest of your life. So absolutely critical that not only does he arrive, and the arrival part is really a challenge when it comes to the storytelling. You very, very appropriately described how we meet Reacher in this book, and you always need, it's almost like a coincidence is involved every time. It has to be that Reacher happens to be in the particular town or city where this particular crime or villain is getting up to his evil ways, and so we always feel the reader will give you a pass, one per novel, and so the pass, we always use it for how Reacher gets entangled in the mystery. And in this case, as you say, we wanted to make it just straightforward. Reacher, as we know, well-established, Reacher likes to travel the country either by bus or by hitchhiking. And of course, if you ride around in cars a lot, at some point you're going to be involved in an accident. So in this case, this was the time that the car Reacher was in, had an accident, or was it an accident?
Right.
We need to find out. So Reacher wakes up. Yeah, he's not the most patient and forgiving of characters. So when he wakes up with a headache, with a pain in his arm, shackled to a table in the dark, he doesn't start this book in the sunniest frame of mind. And the bad guys that he encounters pay the price for that.
Yeah. Matter of fact, here's the first line, sentence one: the pain hit first. Then the sound followed, the way lightning beats thunder in a storm. The pain was in Jack Reacher's right wrist, and then it goes from there. So he's in the dark, he's handcuffed. And, when you start reading that, you're like, well, what is he doing? Why is he there? Why is he hurt? What's going on? So what I love about that is the simplicity, again, yet you put the onus on me. Oh, I get to wonder what's going on, and your mind kicks into that solution-oriented thinking. I love that.
Yep. Absolutely, and that's the way a book should work. I think it's a contract between the author and the reader. You're both going to be involved in this thing. It's not one party doing all the work and the other one sitting back passively. You're both in it together. And exactly as you pointed out, the way I think an effective book works is that you either ask or imply a question at the beginning, exactly as you were saying. How did Reacher get there? What's going on? And then the reader people are hardwired to try to seek the answer to questions. So the reader is going to want to figure that out. They're going to want to find out all of the answers to all of these questions.
Yeah.
And then it's from that point on, it's the author and the reader, hand in hand, going through the whole process from start to finish, laying out the clues, figuring out what they mean, putting the puzzle together until you get the complete picture at the end.
I had never put it together, Andrew, until perhaps this book, and I don't know why. I'm a late bloomer. We'll strike it up to that. But I was sitting there thinking, because you had just said this at the beginning of the show, what we like is the simplicity of, he arrives in a new town, it's a new situation, and then he leaves. And I think to myself, you hear this all the time, well, so-and-so has a series of 5 books or 10 books or 25 books. And you're like, oh, where do I fit into that? Where do I start? Do I have to go back to the beginning? Yet with Reacher, as always been, I can just pick it up as I go. It's not attached to before or after.
Well, I'm really happy that you find that, because that's exactly what we're aiming for. Because if people want to start at the beginning and read all the way through, that is fabulous. But if they just want to pick up whichever one they see in a store or a library, they should all stand alone. And it's tricky sometimes making sure that you get the right amount of backstory so that the new readers are going to understand who Reacher is and what he's doing, and why does he only carry a toothbrush?
Right.
Why doesn't he have a job? Why doesn't he have a house? So there's always that kind of ground that needs to be covered, but we don't want to overdo that, so that the people who've been with us from the beginning aren't thinking, oh God, not this part again. I've heard this 29 times now. What's going on? So we try to get that balance, so that there's a sort of certain kind of warm reassuringness when you come to the bit that explains about the house, or
Sure.
So that I think if you get the balance right, it does make it so that it's absolutely possible. You could pick up the first, you could pick up the 29th, which is this one, or you could pick up anything in between. So I think it makes it a more enjoyable process for the reader, as you were saying, because if you just want to just see whether you like one, you don't feel this enormous burden that you've got to read this huge number of volumes before you can get to it.
And on top of that, for those who are keeping score at home, this clocks in at that perfect size, if you ask me. 323, I think, is the page count, 325. So it's right there in that pocket. It's just that right amount. People who are pushing it, and nothing against longer books, 450, 500. For some psychological reason, he goes, oh, do I have that much time? Can I carve out this? But for some silly reason, 3 1/4 goes, oh, I got a pretty good idea how long it's going to take, and I can just pick it up and have a little snack as I go. Unfortunately or otherwise, I tend to find myself doing, flipping the pages, because the way you end each chapter, I'm like, oh, just one more. And then you're like, okay, I need to know what's coming up next.
Excellent. Well, that's what we want. We want it to be that, once you start reading, it grabs you and you can't put it down. So I'm really happy to hear that that's how you were finding it.
Well, folks, the book is in too deep. It's familiar world. It's solid storytelling. It's classic Reacher. I want to back up and jump out of Andrew Child and get back to Andrew Grant, which is your given name, because I was checking up your website. I like to keep tabs on you. And there's a whole litany of books you're writing under your real name. If you're taking over this franchise, does the Reacher franchise it require so much attention that you kind of have to let your own, we'll call it personal projects, although a craftsman is a craftsman across the board? Or how are you handling that, Andrew?
Well, at the moment, the Reacher stuff has taken all my time and more.
Yeah.
So I haven't been able to do any work on my own books, but I'm certainly not done. The series I was working on before joining forces with Lee was the Paul McGrath Janitor series, which I was absolutely loving. I really, really enjoy that series. And so there's definitely more to come on that. It's just, I'm working on that alchemy thing, trying to create a few more hours in the day. And as soon as I get the secret for that figured out, I will definitely be producing more, because it's all, it's there in the back of my mind. It's bubbling away. It's just, finding the time to get it down on the page, but I will do that.
Awesome. Because what's interesting, and let's take 60 seconds on this, because you have this character, his cover is a courthouse janitor, and his cause is justice. So if you don't mind the elementary question, where did that character come from, and how did he decide on that particular job while he's trying to take care of justice?
Well, thank you, Dave. I mean, I think it came together really well in the end, and it was something that had been bubbling away in my mind for a long, long time, trying to figure out. I had a sense of this character, but I didn't have him really rooted or in a place or a time. And I guess in the same way that we talk about Reacher being a little bit like the knight errant archetype, I was thinking of the kind of Robin Hood archetype.
Oh, yeah.
Because again, in nearly all cultures, there is a version of the noble person who's fallen from grace somehow, who then comes back and needs to win his way, kind of earn his way back into society. And he does this by helping people, but by being anonymous. That's always really important with the Robin Hood character. No one ever knows who he is. He just does these good deeds, in the darkness, and no one ever knows it's him, or at least who he is. They might know who his alter ego is, but they don't know who the real person is. So I thought about how to do that in the real world, and what I came up with was this idea that if you were working as the janitor at the courthouse, it would really be the perfect setup, because you would have security clearance, you could go anywhere in the building.
Oh, yeah.
And you would see everything and you would hear everything. You could be anywhere, listening, watching. But the nature of people is that they don't pay attention to the guy who's walking in the background with the mop or the broom. So he will see everything, no one will see him. And so he will come across, he'll be in a position to uncover anything that is unjust. And in society at the moment, we are seeing this increasing gulf between the people who don't have much and the people who have everything.
Yeah.
And so there's a real tendency for the little guy to get trampled on. You're not going to have as good lawyers. You're not, as a mega corporation, you're not going to, even though the playing field is theoretically level, in real life it isn't. So I've had this idea, the janitor, he sees that someone has got someone's got trampled, a decent person, an honest person has got trampled on by some dishonest person or corporation, and he just decides very quietly, without anybody knowing it's him, that he will just go and put that right. So I came up with a scenario for why he needed to infiltrate the courthouse, and that was that he'd been brought up by his father. His mother had died when he was a baby, and his father was a staunch pacifist. So his way of rebelling, his teenage rebellion, was that he would join the army. So he joins the US Army, winds up in military intelligence, so therefore has all the necessary skills to take on a role, to infiltrate an organization. And he, at a certain point in his life, he realizes the feud with his father is bad. He needs to get out of the army. He needs to go back home to New York to reconcile. But when he gets home, he finds out that his father has recently died. The police thought he was murdered, but something went wrong with the trial. Something at the last minute derailed the trial, and the people responsible got away with it. And so he realizes that if he's going to get to the truth, he's going to need to go to the courthouse to find out what it is that derailed the trial. And while he's there, you've got something I've never tried before in any of the books I've done. You've kind of got two arcs going on. You've got each book has an individual story, self-contained story. Somebody has been screwed over by the system, right. So the janitor's going to put that right. But going across more than one book, you've got his quest to find out what happened to his father, who was responsible, was he murdered or not? If so, who did it, and how is he going to bring them to justice? So I've really enjoyed doing that, and I think it's what we need. It feels right for the time. This idea that in the same way that Reacher shows up, fixes your problem and leaves, I think there's a real need that that in this world where everything is out of kilter and regular, honest, hardworking people aren't getting a fair crack, then you need someone who's going to come in and balance those scales for them. And the thing that I did, my favorite part of these books, I talked about how it's important for Reacher always to leave at the end of a Reacher book. The way that the Janitor books work is that each one, he's going to solve some downtrodden person's problem, and at the end, they're not going to know who's helped them. All they know is that everything has been put right. So they seek out the janitor at the courthouse. The final page of every one, the person finds the janitor and says to him, "Listen, everything is worked out, but I don't understand how. The only person I told was you. So did you do it?" And every time he just says, "How could I have done it? I'm just the janitor." And then it moves on to the next story, because he's not looking for credit. He's not looking for glory. He's just doing the right thing, which I think is something that's hugely appealing in a world where there are so many obstacles to us doing the right thing. And in real life, often good doesn't prevail. So it's really, really appealing to find that happen, even if it's just in the pages of a book.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for taking all that time on that series because, and while of course we're here for In Too Deep, I love hearing those backstories. And having not read that series, I'll be honest with you, I didn't know that, but now it's intriguing enough now that I have to go back and take a peek. So give me a title that I can jot down. So if I'm going to go back and start with the Janitor series, what would be a great place to start?
I would say start with the first one, which is called Invisible.
Okay, done. Also, you triggered something in my mind, and I was thinking to myself, what was it about, and I hope this is an okay analogy, what is it about Dexter, the character on television that we love so much? And a similar thing, he's doing his own sort of justice. It's pretty wicked justice. However, we can't help but root for him because he's getting rid of the bad guys. And I thought, and then when I heard that Dexter was coming back after he was already killed, I'm like, wow, we just can't get enough of that hero character.
But there is a heroic element because the person ultimately is doing good and is opposing evil, and I think there's what people often enjoy in fiction, in books or TV, is when you inject that gray area. You've got the fact that at the end of the day, the bad guys get their comeuppance and the good guys prevail. But how many laws can you break along the way? How many bad things can you do and still come out ahead on the positive column? It's a difficult one. I mean, I don't have an answer to it, and I guess that's one of the things that people like about that kind of series is that there is that moral dilemma. It's not clear. It's not easy. If it's a straightforward case of somebody commits a crime and they get arrested by the police, pretty straightforward. Mm-hmm. But if for some reason the system can't cope, because otherwise I don't think it would work. If it would have been easy just to call the police and the police come and arrest the guy rather than Dexter do his thing, don't think that would have worked very well. So it has to be that somehow it's beyond the scope of the proper authorities, which opens the door to somebody doing it on their own, in their own way. And then the question is, how far can that person go? And we face that also with Reacher, because clearly Reacher is not always operating within the bounds of the law either. And sometimes people ask questions. Well, you have Reacher kill people, you have Reacher beat people up. Is that okay? Do the ends justify the means? And so that's something from a moral point of view that's really interesting to explore. And I think it's one of the things that makes crime fiction a really rich genre. Sometimes it's dismissed as a kind of, not as good as the proper literary people. But ultimately, I think that it's things like that ability to explore moral issues and moral dilemmas that make it something that is actually very, very legitimate and very rewarding to read, because it leaves you with questions. It leaves you with things to debate like we're doing now.
You mentioned near the beginning of the show about how you and your brother don't plan. We've heard the tired cliches of pantser versus plotter. I like to just call it off the cuff. To me, it's off the cuff. You show up at the typewriter or the keyboard, and you go, this is my character. I have a pretty good idea where he's going. I have a pretty solid idea of where he's going to end. I got to at least kind of know where he's going to go, so that I can, pull out the map and take the journey to where I'm going. But I don't have to know the details of each town. And so as I think about that, I ask myself, especially now, and I know you're several books in with your brother, but I'd love to know that technique if you're cool with that, or just a ballpark of so we're talking about In Too Deep. You sit down and you chat. Hey, here's the new story. This is the premise of the story. We know who the character is in the world, and it's going to change. But does Lee start first, and you start first, and does he write until he gets tired, and then you jump in? I would just this technique of writing with a co-writer is fascinating to me.
Yeah, well, it's evolved over the books that we've collaborated on, because at the beginning, the first one, it was much more. The first one we did was the Sentinel, and that was much. But there was one thing about that was different, which was it was the first one we were doing, and Lee said he was the only time he's gone into a book with a really clear objective, and that was he felt that Reacher had slipped kind of too far behind the curve in terms of technology, because by this point that was the 25th book in the series, and Reacher, over that period, over a quarter of a century, he had changed quite a bit. And so if you look back to, I believe it's the 7th book, Persuader, Reacher has need at one point to, he takes off his shoe, he reveals that it has a false heel, he pulls out a little device. It was kind of pre-BlackBerry, I guess, at the time, but he has this device hidden in his shoe that he can use to essentially send an email. So all of those years ago, Reacher is using concealed miniature gadgets to send emails, right? So clearly Reacher can use technology.
Right.
And also, we know that Reacher is a really intelligent guy, so there's not going to be some machine that he can't figure out. And we know he is an experienced, accomplished investigator. Mm-hmm. So if there is something which could give him a shortcut to a clue, which could reveal a clue, which could help him to track down a suspect more quickly, he's not going to ignore it simply because it's not the kind of thing that he enjoys. But Lee had gotten this track of making Reacher oblivious to technology, and he felt that he'd gone too far with that, and I think he was right. And so what he did was he asked me to try to find a way to nudge Reacher, not all the way back ahead of the curve or anything, but at least closer to the modern day. And I think that was really important, because what I was trying to get to was the distinction between, if you imagine a smartphone, Reacher's not going to be interested in having a smartphone because he's not going to want to pay the bills, he's not going to want the commitment of it. And if you think of the things smartphones do, like social media, Reacher, obviously, if it was necessary as part of an investigation, he could work out how to do it because he's really smart.
Sure.
But what he would never understand is why anybody would want to do it. Reacher, he'd be sitting there in a diner enjoying his burger and his pie, but he would have no concept, no inkling. Why would someone want to put a picture of your burger on the internet and say, "Look, I'm having lunch"? That is what he wouldn't understand. Not the technology, because that's just a tool that he would use if he had a need for it. So Lee said, let's try to move Reacher a little bit further, closer to the modern day. So I said, absolutely, we can do that. But I said, what I want to do, if we're moving him one step forward in the technology, I want to go back to the way he was originally in terms of his dialogue, because early Reacher was hilarious. He was witty, he was sarcastic. Not only could he beat someone up or shoot them or stab them or whatever, he could destroy them verbally.
Right.
There was a scene in the fourth book, I think, Running Blind in the United States, where he's taking a car ride with a woman who turns out not to be a very nice character, and he just tears her to pieces verbally. It is laugh out loud funny. I remember when I first read it, and I just thought, yeah, we've missed that too, because we've gone to this sort of very, brusque, taciturn Reacher who never says more than 2 words. So I said, if we're rebalancing in terms of the technology, let's rebalance in terms of the wit and the humor as well.
Bravo.
We brought those things in for the Sentinel. We worked that together very much, what is happening, discussing what's happening next. But by the time we'd done 4 of them, The Secret was the 4th one, which was last year's book. Lee really, he did want to move, to pull back. So the we still had great fun talking about about the scenario, what's going to happen, how it's going to unfold. But he certainly wasn't involved with the physical typing this time. He didn't. He felt it was time for him to play the big brother card and and not have to do the laborious parts anymore. So the process was really exactly the same as before. It was a question of we started by, I came up with the idea of the scene that you described with Reacher shackled to the table in the darkened room, and then literally ran through it. How did he get there? What was going on? Who was involved? What were they doing? What were they trying to hide? And what's always really important with any book, but a thriller in particular, is to be able to boil it down very, very succinctly. It may be even into one sentence. What does the bad guy want? And if you can do that, then everything else can stem from it. And so I was clear in my mind about what the bad guy wanted, what he was up to, what his goal was. And then just the story flowed from there. And the thing with it was, I knew that it's not a big surprise to find out that there is going to be a big confrontation between Reacher and the bad guys.
Right.
That's always going to happen. So I knew that there would be that was going to happen at some point, but I didn't know exactly when in the story. Obviously, more towards the end than towards the beginning, but not exactly where. And also, I had no idea where it was going to be. It wound up being in a fun location, actually, a place that I really like to go myself. But when we started out, I had no idea that was where we were going to finish. It was just as the story proceeded, it led to that location because there actually is a very valid reason for the bad guy needing to be where he is at the end when Reacher finds him, and they have a full and frank exchange of views.
A full and frank exchange of views. That's a very classy way of saying somebody got their ass kicked.
Yeah, saying it was time to break out the body bags.
Yeah. I go back to this. This is why we come to this series, because there is a problem and we know Reacher's going to handle it. And just for the record, Alan Richardson, yeah. Perfect casting. I think everybody in the entire free world goes, perfect casting, and good for him. And I understand that in real life, he's just a teddy bear of a guy. What does a bad guy want and what stands in the way? I mean, that really, am I right, Andrew? If you just walk into the room thinking that when you sit down to write, who's my good guy? Who's the bad guy? What does he want? What's standing in the middle and how to solve it? I love it. And the fact that, I'm going to go back to this off the cuff versus planning. And I always say this, and I've talked to so many people about this. I think the last time I chatted with someone, maybe it was Lee Goldberg, and we were talking about the wonder, the magic, the surprise that we gain as the writer, as the creator, when we sit down. If we have it completely planned out, then some of that magic and serendipity may not be there. And I'm kind of like that. We all know that there's got to be a little tiny bit of framework. But I think of guys like maybe it's Jeffrey Deaver said, I think he told me in a show many shows ago, that he'll write as much as 100 pages minimum of outlines and thoughts and stories and plots, because he's so famous for all those nooks and crannies and switchbacks. But I kind of lean more toward your style too, I think, I got to say.
Yeah, I mean, I've tried it both ways, and I think that you've always got to keep your eye on. The goal is to provide the best possible book, the most enjoyable experience for the reader. And I feel that comes from, I think there are ways in which it might be easier to write if you if you're just following an outline that you have already produced. It could be easier. It's certainly a lot less scary, because when you sit down in the morning, you know exactly what you're going to do because it's already sketched out, as opposed to sitting down and thinking, the page is blank. How do I fill it?
Right.
What's going to happen? So, and that can be a scary feeling. So I think it can lead to an easier, and calmer and smoother writing experience. Less time spent banging your head on the wall because you can't figure out what the next step is going to be. But I think that you do lose. Novels are long, they're rich, they've got all kinds of. You go off on tangents. You add in strange musings about different things, especially Reacher, because he's a curious guy. There was one, I forget which book it was, one that Lee did on his own, where Reacher's musing about the inaccuracy of describing a spiral staircase, because it really ought to be a helical staircase, because a spiral is only 2 dimensions. Things like that you would lose if you were just entirely filling in the blanks of something that has already been determined, I think.
Yeah. I want to jump on one quick little thing. I love the fact that there's more humor brought back, because it's those pithy little one-liners that he tosses out. Reminds me a little bit of, to borrow a not too dissimilar genre in one sense, I think it was it Roger Moore or... Yeah, it wasn't Pierce Brosnan. It was Roger Moore who really started, it seems like, with those little side-handed little one-liners that are humorous in the midst of the most traumatic situation. Am I right? It was Roger Moore, wasn't it?
Yeah, Roger Moore did a lot of that. Yeah.
And I like that.
I think Pierce Brosnan threw some in. He had some too, but I think that direction started with Roger Moore.
Yeah. Before, as we kind of start to wrap, there's a couple of things I want to drill down on if you got just an extra couple of minutes.
All the time you need, David.
Thank you. I'd love to know your thoughts, because you're look at this. Your brother, one of the most prolific writers known today. You're right there up there with him. Your wife, Tasha, is also a prolific writer in her own right. And I think to myself, how do you see the world today of publishing? And what do you think about traditional versus self-publishing? What do you think about it in general? Do you see the shift that has constantly taken place? And do you think there's a new evolution coming? That's really unpacked, a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, I've been, there was this, there's a cliche in publishing that it takes 10 years to become an overnight success.
Right.
Well, I've been doing this for 18 years now. So there was a spell a while ago where I was thinking, okay, this is getting near to make or break. And so, it takes a long time to get established. And I think that one thing, I think over the years, I've seen good developments and developments that are less favorable. I think one of the things that's less favorable that I would encourage publishers to do more of is to give the newer writers more time to establish themselves, because it takes time to build a readership. It takes time for readers to find out who you are and to decide if they like your book and want to look forward to that book every year. And so I would, on the one hand, absolutely urge publishers to relax a little bit in terms of looking at the numbers. Look at the potential, nurture that potential, and give people time to establish themselves. That would be one thing that I think would be a really good development.
Yes.
One thing that already has developed in a positive way, and obviously we still have further to go, but the landscape does seem to be a lot more diverse and inclusive than it was when I started all those years ago. So very happy that's the direction we're going. But again, would encourage publishers to double down on that. They've done well, but there's still a lot more that can be done and should be done. So to continue to ensure that there are barriers, any barriers out there are sought out and removed, so that everybody who has a story to tell has the opportunity to do that. And I think self-publishing was a route that if people choose that route because it suits their working style and it suits if they want to be very hands-on about every aspect, then absolutely that's the route they should take. But I wouldn't want it ever to be that people feel forced down that route because the traditional publishers are not doing a good enough job of welcoming people from different backgrounds or with different kinds of voices. So, I believe that it's great to have both avenues, but I think the any barriers to entry to either avenue, we need to continue working to identify and remove.
And in that same vein, are you a fan of using social media? I know it's kind of it's pretty necessary, pretty needed to be able to progress in our careers. Do you see it as being a mandatory, an accent that's helpful, or number three, maybe not even that crucial? In other words, it doesn't really push my needle forward.
Yeah, I think it probably is crucial. I think that I think it would be extremely dangerous to try to forge a career in publishing these days and not be active. But at the same time, personally, it's the thing I find the hardest. I grew up in a place where it was really frowned upon to talk about yourself. Anything that could be perceived as boastful or self-promoting was really frowned upon. So, of all the adaptations that you have to make when you start in a new career, that idea that you're going to be, basically, taking a digital megaphone and using it to yell about your own stuff is very, very difficult. Even after 18 years, I still find it really hard to do.
Yeah, I get it. A lot of people, we've had lots of conversations on the show about the necessary evil of it and how deep down the rabbit hole should you go. And I think I come out at this place of, as long as scrolling social media doesn't become the predominant activity that takes you away from writing, but is enhancing your process, then you're good. I see a lot of folks, like, one thing that kind of makes me laugh sometimes is when I get a play-by-play from authors on social media where they are in the process. Hey, I got this many words today, and here's a picture of my screen. I'm sitting in a coffee shop. And I think maybe early on when I first started, that was kind of a cool idea. But now I go, how much time, and I feel like I'm on a soapbox here, but how much time does one spend putting that social stuff out and not actually doing the work, if that makes sense?
Absolutely. The balance has to be right. The work has to come first, because if you don't do the work, then you don't have anything to promote. So the work has to come first. And then I think with the promotion, two things are really important. One is that you have to move with the times, because you're absolutely right. There was a time when, it was almost quite charming to see somebody say, oh, I was in my local Starbucks and I wrote this number of words, and here's the line of latte cups that I got through. That, there was a time when that would be quite fun. But, that time has passed. You have to move with the times. And also you have to do something that's authentic to yourself, because, in the same way that you try to find your voice when you're writing, you need to do that on social media. And if you're forcing yourself to adopt a persona that just doesn't match your own, I think that always comes across as phony. And then there are certain things that I would just always, set my teeth on edge. I think people used to call it humble bragging, didn't they? There was that thing where, you get somebody online saying, oh, my wrist hurts so much because I had to sign all of these copies, and you just think, thing is, everybody knows what you're actually saying. So, and by the way, it's obnoxious, so don't do it. Yeah. But, there are things like that I just think are absolutely off limits.
Oh, that is so hilarious. Well, Andrew, I want to be respectful of your time, so I like to wrap and I remember you giving me a great piece of writing advice, which is how I always close the show, and I don't want to repeat it, and I want to see if it's shifted any. So if my listener is listening, they're going, I want to make a career of this, just like Andrew and his brother Lee, whether it's action, thriller, romance, mystery, psychological thriller, I don't care what it is. That we look to our mentors, like I look to you and go, man, yeah, there's a little piece of me. I want to be like them. What's the writing advice that you could give to my listeners today?
What I always say is my only advice is to ignore all advice, because there is the best person in the world at writing your book is you. No one else knows how to write your book. Only you do. So ignore all of that, all of those people who tell you you should do this, you shouldn't do that. Ignore them completely. Write it the way that you want to write it, because you are the only person who can write your book. And remember that you have one job, and that job is to start at the beginning and get to the end. Your job is absolutely not to worry about, is this book good? Will anybody like it? Will I be able to sell it? That does not matter. That is someone else's job for another day. Your only job is to start at the beginning, get to the end, and do it authentically in your own voice. So that's what I would say.
Andrew, I think your piece of advice, and I recall this from 2 years ago, is perhaps my absolute favorite, because you do a couple things. You're giving me good instruction. This is put your ass in the chair and your fingers on the keyboard and get busy. If you want to write, write. If you're going to be a writer, do it. Don't sit around talking about it. That drives me nuts. And the other is this very genuine, kind way of your saying, give yourself permission to do the thing that is burning inside of you. That thing that's making you tick, making you wonder, making you daydream. It's your book. You get to do the way you want to. And the third thing is not worrying about the process. I always say I'm more concerned about the what, which is write the book, not the how it gets done. I'll let the how take care of itself. And I've kind of done that throughout my career. So bravo, sir. Bravo.
Well, thank you, David. And, thank you for doing this show, because, it connects people who have the same interest and the same passion. And that is a really, really valuable thing. So thank you for doing it.
Well, thank you. And thank you for your time. Folks, if you want to learn more, go to andrewgrantbooks.com. Of course, also jackreacher.com. And a curious question as I wrap here, Andrew. I know that I can drive traffic and people who want to learn more about your books, and I'm going to be digging down on the Janitor series for sure. AndrewGrantBooks.com, great. JackReacher.com, kind of led by Lee. Will you show up more on JackReacher.com?
Yeah, I think that's the plan as we go forward to transition that way. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, again, thank you so much for your time.
David, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me as a guest. Thank you.
Your front row seat to the